Hi everyone, welcome back to Kristen's Epic Adventures. Today we're going to be talking about some tips on running your very first adventure. So make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when our new videos are up, and if you found this content helpful, just go ahead and hit that like button so more friends can find us. Welcome back. Today we're talking about some tips on running your very first adventure. Sometimes sitting down to play Dungeons & Dragons for the first time can be a little nerve-wracking. The first time I played, I was a little unsure of what to do, and it made me kind of nervous. So here's some tips that I have for you on playing for the very first time. My first tip would be to read through the adventure you're going to play. If you've decided to play a one-shot, which is an adventure that can be completely played from start to finish in one session, whether it's 2 or 3 hours or 4 or 5 hours, definitely read the whole adventure start to finish. You really want to familiarize yourself with what's going to be going on in the story. If you're playing maybe a Dungeons & Dragons published adventure, which can take months and months to play sometimes, depending on how often your group gets together, I definitely recommend reading through at least 2 or 3 chapters. Definitely the first chapter, and at the end of that chapter, your players may actually end up to decide to go in a couple different directions. And if you can anticipate what those directions might be, you might want to read both of those chapters as well. You don't need to read the entire book, although if you have time and your schedule allows, I do recommend it, or even at least really in-depth reading the first few chapters and then at least skimming over the rest of the book. You kind of at least want to be familiar with the entire story, start to finish, so you can kind of judge where you think your players might want to go. Although, I'll tell you, sometimes they can trick you and completely go in an opposite direction than you thought they were going to go, which is kind of some of the fun and excitement of playing. But that would be my first tip, to definitely familiarize yourself with the adventure, read through it, second tip. Second tip would be to hold a session 0. Now, session 0 isn't needed if you're just going to play a one-shot, because the entire story is going to start and finish in one gaming session. But if you're playing a campaign, whether it's a homebrew campaign that you made or a published adventure from Dungeons & Dragons, I would definitely hold a session 0. Now, in a session 0, what you usually do is all get together. Now, you might not be able to physically get together right now. If you can, maybe you're playing with your family that you live with, you definitely can. But you may need to do this over something like Discord or Zoom or email or something like that, if you're still in an area where we need to social distance. So for a session 0, what you're going to do is everybody is going to come together, and you might do things like build your characters together. That's a lot of fun, to all sit around the table together with your character sheets or tablet or laptop if you're using D&D Beyond, the pencil and dice and player's handbook, and make your characters from scratch while you all sit there together. That can be so much fun. It also kind of gives everybody a sense of what different types of characters everybody's planning on playing. You might realize at that point, oh, you're going to be a fighter and you're going to be a rogue. Oh, well, we really could use a healer, so I'm going to be a cleric or a paladin. It kind of gives you a chance to round out the party if that's the kind of game that you'd like to play. Or if everybody just had their heart set on playing a certain character and that's what they want to play and you don't have a healer, that's okay, go for it. This is your game and you can make it whatever you want. So don't feel like you need to have a well-rounded party. Sometimes the most interesting role-playing sessions come from not having a well-rounded party. But that's one of the things you do in a session 0, is kind of all sit together and roll the dice and make your characters together. This can also give the DM a chance to see what everybody's playing, what they've kind of chosen for their background, and maybe even a little bit of the backstory that they've come up with for their characters. What that's going to do is give the Dungeon Master an opportunity to take little snippets from each character's background or backstory and kind of work it into the story that we're playing. It really adds like a personal touch and just kind of makes it more fun and interesting when all of a sudden your character that maybe was orphaned at birth suddenly finds out that their parents are actually still alive or something like that. It's a really neat opportunity to add some role-playing opportunities to the game. So that's another good option. Also, it allows the Dungeon Master to give the players some background on where the story is going to be taking place. The environment your story is going to take place in is going to be very different whether you're playing Tomb of Annihilation or Curse of Strahd. Now, Curse of Strahd takes place, it's kind of like a gothic horror type adventure, which takes place in the land of Barovia. Think like Count Dracula castle area. Whereas Tomb of Annihilation takes place in the jungles of Chult. So two very different geographical areas. And a session 0 is going to give the Dungeon Master a chance to kind of give the players a background. This is where our story is going to take place. This is kind of what the environment is like. These are some of the types of people you may come across. Maybe even a little bit of background on if there's any government and if it's going to affect the story. That might be an important part. Currency, anything like that. So it's a good chance to lay the background as well for where the setting of the story is. Let's see, what else? Session 0. Oh, lastly, Session 0 gives you an opportunity to go over any house rules. If you're the Dungeon Master and you've decided we're going to use that cool house rule that Kristen's Epic Adventures uses for critical hits, where instead of rolling the damage dice twice, the first roll is assumed to be maximum damage and the second one we roll for. Maybe you're going to employ some house rules like that in your game. You might even want to go over things like any penalties if players are late. I've known some games to do things like that before too. So it's a good opportunity to go over that, see if the players have any suggestions for house rules, or maybe make a decision on house rules together. But these are all things that can be done at a Session 0 before you jump into actually playing that can create a lot less confusion down the road. Okay? My last tip I have for you is to not get too hung up on the rules. Now, I would say it's a great idea to know the basic rules. And by basic rules, I literally mean each person's turn has an action and a movement. Some characters, based on the options they've chosen, may have bonus actions or reactions. How combat works, basically rolling for initiative to get a turn order, rolling to attack to see if you hit, and then rolling with certain dice for damage depending on your weapon. Also the basic gist of how ability checks and skill checks work. And I'm talking about the basics. Now, things like that are good to know. And those are not difficult rules to learn and know them. My other suggestion is don't feel the need to crack open the rule book every time you have a question about every single little rule. I would open it up and check if it's going to make a major difference maybe in the story. Maybe you're trying to deal that last blow to a huge foe and you really need to check on how the damage on a certain spell works to see if it's successful. Or maybe it's a matter of whether or not one of the players gets knocked unconscious and has to start making death saves to see whether or not their character survives. If no one else at the table minds, in those instances, I might open up the book and, check a rule or two. Or if everybody you're playing with really is a stickler for the rules and wants to take the time to stop and look things up and it's not impeding the fun, go for it. But if some players are starting to feel like, or even you as a DM are starting to feel like, oh, every time I'm opening this book every 5 minutes to check on a rule, then don't worry about it. Just make a decision, stick with that decision for the rest of that session, and look up the rule later. If you find out that you did it wrong, no big deal. You just adjust next time. Really, I would not get to be too much of a stickler for the specifics of all the little tiny rules here and there. You want to be having fun, okay? So if you guys have any suggestions as well as recommendations for your first time you're playing, your first session, leave them in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what you guys do for maybe what you do at your Session 0s. And again, any tips you may have for running your first adventure, but those are a few of mine. I'll see you next time, guys. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can be notified when our new videos are up. And if you found this content helpful, give us a thumbs up and a like so more friends can find us. Thanks. Bye.